on my team. Has nothing to do with your team, just on my team. And this is the whole reason we split the equation into two teams in the first place. So how can I get rid of that negative? I'm going to tell you. We're going to divide only the terms on Team Albert. We're going to divide that by whatever that number is, whatever that value is. In this particular example, it's a -1. The -1 doesn't go away. It just stays on the outside. And now, once you do that, remember the -50 is u. It stays the same. Nothing changes the -50. But now that I've divided by -1, I can actually focus on what my real a and b terms are. So negative x squared divided by -1 is going to give me positive x squared. Positive 16 divided by -16 is going to give me negative 16x. Okay, so now I have my real b value. My b value is negative 16. If I use positive 16, the whole thing would not work. So negative 16 divided by 2 is equal to what? Chris, what's negative 16 divided by 2? Good. Negative 8. And b over 2 squared is just negative 8 squared, which is going to give me positive 64. So remember, you always use your second piece of equipment first. So I'm going to use my positive 64 first. I'm going to take that value and make my team stronger. Team Albert's going to get stronger. So I'm going to add, or try to, add positive 64 inside the bracket for my team. And remember, your team is not as good as my team, so we're going to take away this 64 from your team. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm doing a kind of an opposite scenario. These two equations represent a scale, and in order to balance a scale, whatever you do one side, you have to do to the opposite to the other team. Now I want to ask you, I want you to remember that the negative 15 is you. You represent that on your team, so nothing changes that. However, what did we do on the first side to my team that we haven't balanced out yet? What was our first step? What did we do? Yeah. Good. Now, because we divided by -1, I have to balance that action. That wasn't fair. I did something on my team that I didn't balance out on your team. So now I'm going to do that. I'm going to do the opposite of dividing by -1, which means multiplying by -1. So that actually helps you in your favor, because negative 64 times -1 makes this number a positive 64. So that actually helps your team out a little bit. So negative 50, remember, a lot of people try to balance it by hitting the original number. That's why I keep telling you, picture that you are that number, because nothing can touch you. Nothing gets multiplied by you, or, whatever. But anyway, so the negative 50 stays the same. It's the negative 64 that we balance out. So I'm done with this piece of equipment. My final step is to compress. I've got to take my perfect square trinomial and I compress it. And instead of factoring, all I have to do is look at my first piece of equipment, the first formula that I figured out, -8. And so this becomes, the whole inside of this binomial becomes x minus 8 squared. Very last thing I have to do is just combine the members of your team. So negative 50 plus 64 is going to give me a positive 14. And this is going to stay the same. So I have -1 x minus 8 squared plus 14. So what this means, if you've done Unit 10, you will be aware that I have a vertex that has been reflected. So my vertex is going to represent a maximum point. And I have a vertex, remember, whatever is inside the bracket. I have a -8 inside the bracket, but my real value of my vertex is going to be a positive 8, and the y-coordinate of my vertex is going to be 14. Also, from this vertex form of the equation, I know that there's been a reflection in the x-axis, and that's one transformation. And there's also been a horizontal shift to the right by 8 and a vertical shift up by 14. So Unit 10 and 11, everything you learned from Unit 10, you can use back in Unit 11 and on the Unit 11 test. So on the in-class test, if I were to ask this type of question, I would ask you to complete the square, state the vertex, and state all the transformations. Okay? Okay, let's do another example that's similar to this. So this is really, really important, guys. So I know there's a lot of steps, but I need you to stay with me. I'm going to do a question that involves a fraction because I do not want you to be scared of fractions. So please write the problem down. We're still going to figure out what my b over 2 value is, as well as my b divided by 2 squared value. Okay. So remember, this is Team Albert, and let's call this Team U, where the negative 13 represents U. Okay, what is the very first step? I'm not going to do this problem, you're going to do this problem. What's the very first step that we have to do? Aisha, what do you think I have to do? Yes, so not just the fraction, but whatever is in front of the x squared. Before we can play this game, we have to divide not every single term, but just all the terms on my team by that fraction. So I'm going to divide the first term by 1/2 and the second term by 1/2. So the 1/2 is going to go on the outside. And inside the bracket, 1/2 divided by 1/2 is just going to give me x squared by itself. But look closely, 6x over 1 divided by 1/2, that's the same as multiplying, flip the reciprocal, so we're multiplying by 2 over 1. So this is going to be positive 12x. Positive 12x. So the fraction, taking out the fraction, actually gives me all whole numbers to work with. Whole numbers. And let's leave the negative 13 the way it is, so I can do my next step on a different line. 1/2 x squared plus 12x. Now I'm going to figure out what my b over 2 value and my b over 2 squared value is. So since my b term, I know my b term is now a positive 12, not positive 6, positive 12. So b over 2 is simply going to be 12 divided by 2, which is positive 6. So my b over 2 squared value is just going to be positive 6 squared, which is positive 36, which gives me positive 36. So what I'm going to do, watch this step closely. If you did not understand the last problem, don't bother about copying it down, just watch what I do. So my team is the best, so I'm going to take the 36 and I'm going to add it to my team. That way my team is now a perfect square trinomial. And the best possible team I could make, a perfect square trinomial. I am now going to take that positive 36 from your team. So we're going to subtract positive 36 from your team. Add on one side, subtract on the other side. We also need to balance the 1/2 that we originally divided from my team. So I'm going to do the opposite